Day will talk about information about the security in Ukraine and the OSCE special monitoring meeting. Michael Butsurki will speak to us. If you want a translation, then get the headset. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I'm glad to see you. First of all, I would like to tell you that right now our mission was visited by Ambassador Samantha Power and Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, who is the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. They were interested in the general situation in the east of Ukraine, about the work of our mission. They also briefly met monitors from the USA.
Yeah, thank you once again for your interest in the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, and as always, our heartfelt thanks to the organizers and supporters of the Ukrainian Crisis Media Center for hosting us. I'd like to update you on the latest developments regarding the security situation in Ukraine as observed by our monitors. Now, the situation in and around Marinka has largely stabilized following the violent events there last week. 7 Ukrainian servicemen were, however, killed in what appeared to have been a landmine explosion on the 8th of June in Krasnohorivka, and that's just north of Marinka. And it demonstrated the continuing risk posed to both military and civilians, even when the fighting has abated. Interlocutors or people on the ground have indeed continued to tell the Special Monitoring Mission of their fear of landmines all across the conflict zone. And of course, now that agriculture is active, farmers are out in their fields, many of them tell us they're unable to work their fields because of the fear of unexploded ordnance. And I can tell you that, you know, as both sides continue to lay more landmines, as there continues to be an accumulation of shells, and if the front line moves in any way, more landmines are planted. So this is going to be, unfortunately, probably a long-lasting threat in the days and months to come. I can tell you also that whilst Marinka may have stabilized, the threat of a sudden flare-up, however, still remains. And that was demonstrated on June 7th. When small arms and light weapon rounds impacted within just 5 meters of Special Monitoring Mission vehicles at a Ukrainian Armed Forces checkpoint near Marinka. Now, following the fighting around Marinka, which may have represented a new development, refocusing of personnel and hardware, I guess we can call it normal patterns of violence have reasserted themselves. Areas in and around Donetsk airport remain the primary focus of the fighting, and with the SMM observing in particular a major spike in violence there on the 9th of June with 331 explosions recorded. Now, there are some days where we get hundreds and hundreds of explosions, so in the kind of wider scheme of things, 300 plus is quite a bit. Now, the Special Monitoring Mission, for security reasons, had not patrolled Shirokina recently, but we're happy to report that on June 9th, the mission was able to get closer, and at that time it heard 8 explosions from a distance and saw fresh unexploded ordnance from 120 millimeter mortar round. Now, the SMM observed no civilians in the village of Shirokine, and the so-called DPR members there told us that all civilians have been evacuated from the village. At the moment, there's no independent way to verify this, but we will continue to keep a close eye on Shirokune. I can also tell you that during that most recent visit, our monitors did spot what appeared to be underage children as well at the checkpoint. And if my memory serves me correctly, this is the second time in recent times that we've seen children, and some of them with arms. The situation, moving on to Luhansk, remains tense, with sporadic violence observed by the mission in Shastia, again in Trochizbenka, Zolote, and Stanitsa Luhanska. On the issue of withdrawal of heavy weaponry, I can tell you that despite claims to the contrary, neither side has completed the withdrawal of heavy weapons. And indeed, the monitoring mission's unmanned aerial vehicles and monitors on the ground have spotted tanks in fire positions on both sides of the contact line. Now, of interest to you will be, again, this points to the incredible value of having observation from the air via a aerial vehicle, is that our UAV spotted a large concentration of weapons at the train station in the vicinity of so-called DPR-controlled Komsomolske. And what it saw, namely, was 7 main battle tanks. And in the same area, the drone or the UAV spotted 35 military trucks and 25 armored personnel carriers. Now, the fact that you have military hardware in one location and then it's close to a railway line may indicate that it was in transit. So we're also keeping a close eye on that particular area because of the existence of that particular railway line. Unfortunately, the drone, the UAV, continues to be subjected to military-grade electronic jamming on both sides of the line of contact, and this is occurring despite an extensive retrofitting of the guidance system on the UAV. As I've said before, when we detect this military-grade jamming, this is technology that isn't found in any hardware store or locally. This is quite sophisticated technology being used to try to confuse the drone. The special monitoring mission continued to report evidence of major restrictions of movement in and out of the zone of conflict. Several crossing points into so-called LPR-controlled territory have been closed. And this has resulted in people-to-people contact being hugely disrupted, resulting in divided communities and even families. And I'm sure many of you have seen past 24 or 48 hours long lineups of civilian vehicles and people waiting to cross that line. As we always talk, we think it's important to update you on the humanitarian situation. Increase in hostilities along the contact line has led to a significant deterioration of the humanitarian situation. According to our friends and partners at the UN Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, there are currently some 5 million people in need of assistance in Ukraine. The delivery of humanitarian aid and medical supplies has been hindered, and I wanted to note in particular the SMM reported on the Rinat Akhmetov Foundation humanitarian aid convoy being stuck in Pavlohrad, and it was awaiting until the security situation permits delivery of aid to Donetsk. So what Ambassador Alpakan, our Deputy Chief Monitor, myself continue to say is civilians continue to pay an unacceptable price in this conflict. People have been killed and wounded, property and livelihoods have been and continue to be destroyed. As both sides to the conflict place military positions in and around civilian infrastructure, the fighting damages services, infrastructure, including gas pipelines and water and electricity supply networks. This is of enormous concern to us. to wind up, an update on our mission strength. We now have 21 new monitors, which brings us to a total of 484 international monitors altogether. Two-thirds of them are deployed in eastern Ukraine. And together with our other international and national staff, we have a total of 772 people in total. Also, very quickly, as we speak, our chief monitor, Ambassador Opakan, is on his way back from Paris, where he attended the Normandy format talks. I don't have the readout with me. That will come soon, but I can tell you some notable progress was made. And most of you will know that last Friday, our Deputy Chief Monitor, Alexander Hug, updated the UN Security Council at a special session on Ukraine, where he was able to talk about the situation in the East, as well as the work and the challenges of the mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Якщо є якісь питання, прошу.
Any questions?
Channel 5, could you please say if the monitoring mission has noticed the entrance to Ukraine of so-called humanitarian convoy from Russian Federation? If so, maybe you know what's in there and what's the purpose for that. Thank you for the question.
So-called Russian humanitarian convoys, we have two potential points of observation. One is directly on the border. If they do cross there, we, as you know by now, we have our sister border monitoring mission. They have limited observation, if I can put it that way. They usually are able to count how many vehicles cross, how many vehicles return, and also whether there was inspection and who was involved in the inspection. In terms of the special monitoring mission to Ukraine on this side of the border, there have been times in the past where we have literally bumped into these so-called humanitarian convoys, and when we do see anything, we do report again on what type of vehicles we've seen, and also whether we've seen them unload, and if we do have seen them unload, what in particular we have seen. But as of the one reported to be happening right now, I don't have any information on that, but if we do encounter the movement of those vehicles, we will say so and try to report on it.
Дякую. Наступне запитання.
Thank you. The next question. 1+1 channel. You were talking about children that you noticed on the territory which is under the control of the terrorists. Have the representatives of OSCE talked to these children? Did you ask why they are there, why they have weapons, why they are fighting, and for who? As far as I know, we could not talk to them, but that is a very important topic.
Children, obviously, in armed conflict is a topic that is very sensitive and one which everyone should take very seriously. There are only two incidents that I have in front of me that we have seen, but of course, we will continue to gather as much information on this type of development as possible. And also, we have excellent working relationship with our partners in the United Nations system. For example, UNICEF, I believe Save the Children is also on the ground. And these are organizations with vast experience in terms of dealing with this type of situation. But of course, we're very concerned about observing this type of development. Anytime there are children involved in armed conflict is unacceptable, and of course there are other issues, international human law and other legal instruments that come into play here.
Дякую. Якщо є ще запитання, чуто.
Thank you. If you have any other questions or clarifications, once not, then thank you, Michael, and we'll hear you next week.